Hello everybody and welcome to this second part of my tutorial about creating a sword model for the Knights of the Old Republic game. And today in this second part we are going to create a UV map for our sword model. Though before we start on that, we first need to do a few extra things on the model itself. First up, we need to make it a mesh. At the moment it's an edible poly and the game cannot use that. So we're going to right click and convert to edible mesh. Then the next step is about the pivot point. So we go to this tab here, hierarchy, effect pivot point. And now we need to align the pivot point from our new sword model with the pivot point of the old sword model. And this will make sure our character holds the sword at the correct position. And so we click on this button here at the top, align, and we click on the old sword model. Then a new window comes up, and at this point we don't need to change anything on this window just yet. So everything is actually in the right spot. Pivot point, Z, Y and X position are all okay. So we can just hit OK, switch back off effect pivot point only, and then I'm first going to hide the old model again, like this. And then one final thing I like to do before I start the UV mapping is here in the NVNMax window, Mesh Tools, and then we use the Reset X form. And now our model is ready for some UV mapping. So in the Modify tab, we go to the Modifier list, all the way to the bottom is here Unwrap UV. And then again, like with Edit Poly on the right, we have all the options for our unwrap modifier. And to start mapping, we need to open UV editor. So click on that, and this larger window comes up. And this larger window actually shows our UV map as it is for the model at this time. And as you can see, it's quite a bit of a mess. So we have a very large part, there's a lots of overlapping edges and things going on, and it's all way too huge because everything from our UV map needs to fit within this checkered square. That is where our layout needs to get at the end of the session. And to start things off, I'm going to start with the biggest part of our model. And to start UV mapping, we have three sorts of selection we can do. We can select by verts, we can select by edge, and select by polygon. I'm going to use select by polygon at this time. And I'm going to start selecting in the 3D viewport. You can actually choose where you select things. You can go and select in the UV window itself, but that's a little bit more difficult right now due to all the overlapping. And sometimes it's easier to work in the 3D viewport. Just so I go select all the polys that make up my blade. So that's one side. I just left click and use Control to keep on adding polys. And I'm selecting both sides of the blade so I can map them in one go. Like this. And then I go to the right side here, I scroll down a little bit, and to map my blade I'm going to use one of the projection options. You can find them here. I'm going to use planar, I'm going to hit the X so it's aligned correctly with my blade, like this. And then I need to zoom in because I've left on an option here, normalize map, and 3ds Max will then try and fit whatever you have selected on your model, and you click any of these mapping options, it will try to fit it into the little square here. And that means it has disformed my blade a little bit. As you can see, it made it very wide, too wide actually. Before we can manipulate the map here in the window, I need to switch off the planar map first again, like this. And then I go into the scaling tool here in the UV window, and I'm gonna choose one of the options, just left click and hold, and we're now gonna scale in only one direction. And I'm going to make my sword a little thinner again, so it looks more like its 3D counterpart, like that. Then there is another, I'm going to, and here in the window, I'm just clicking and holding shift down, and I click and drag and put it to the side so I can start working on the other parts. There is one more thing you need to check when you're UV mapping, and that's stretching. And to easily check if your UV map is working correctly is here at the top. So you just click on the drop down list and you click on the checker pattern, and then in the 3D viewport you immediately see the results of your UV map. And as you can see, we now have this checker pattern onto our model, and we use this checker pattern to make sure there isn't any sort of stretching going on our UV map. We don't want any stretch or odd stuff going on. I'm just going to mess around here just to show you what I mean with the stretching like this. If I make my blade too wide, you can see all the checkers turn into these rectangles. And this would also have an effect if we created a nice silvery skin or metal skin, you know, a good texture for our sword. You don't want the texture to be ruined by a bad UV map, and so it's best to avoid any sort of stretching on the model. Now I'm gonna map the back of the blade. I'm gonna do that first. And again, just control, holding down control and left clicking. I can keep on adding stuff to my selection. Again, I'm going for a planar map, and then I go for the align to Y. And that should give me a good start. Again, it's far too wide, and I need to use my scaling tool to fix it up. That a little bit more narrow. That's okay. Zooming out again. Then just click and drag and move it to the side. So I will now have my blade nicely mapped already. Next part, I'm going to focus on the crossguard here. I'm just going to click on one poly here and hit the Z key, and this will zoom me in a little bit closer to the section I want to map. And now I'm going to click and hold control down, click and drag, and like this I can select a whole bunch of polys in one go, and I'm going to select these last few polys like this, and these can come along as well. I missed that one. Okay, I'm going to zoom out a little, and I'm just going to check if I didn't select any other poly by mistake. It looks okay. This time I'm going to use the box map, align to Z. That's okay. And ooh, that gives me, that's a mess. Okay, at this time the normalize function is working against me. I'm first going to switch it off, so I can just click in the little box here. I go back to box map and I do it again like that. And as you can see, the map now is pretty big compared to the sword. That's not what we want, of course, but at this time it's okay. First up, I want to remove the overlapping parts from each other like this. I'm going to rotate that one about 90 degrees. So I'm going to use this button here, rotate 90, like that. Okay. And then we're going to use our scaling tool. Scale it down like that. And voila, the crossguard is now mapped. I'm just going to leave it here at the left for the moment. And I'm going down here to this little knob at the bottom, and in my view I'm just holding down Control, click and drag again, click and drag this, just looking around. Okay, I've selected all the sides I need to, and then I'm going to use the cylinder Z. Okay, and we have a tiny hiccup with the mapping of the cylinder. We have this triangle poking out here, and we have some loose edges here. Loose edges, or edges that are cut, are bright green. Edges that are nicely stitched together and are one part are white. So if I just select this poly and I start to drag, you can see we have a nasty cut here, which can break up our it breaks up our mapping. And first I'm just going to show you how to fix this little problem. So I select the triangle here, I right click, detach edged verts, and I'm just going to click and drag the triangle over here closely to the position it needs to be. And for these little pesky ones, I'm doing the same, detach and detach. Now I go to select by edge, and I click on this edge, right click, stitch. Again, the same here, right click, stitch selected, and stitch selected. Et voila, we now have a good looking UV mapped part. I'm gonna scale it down already a little bit, move it to the side, and now, zoom in a little bit like this. I'm just selecting the top and bottom of this knob, and I'm going to use the planar map Z. Happy with that. I'm going to move it to the side, scale it down a little bit already. This. Okay. That's already one part. Now we need to map the handle of the crossbar. And this will be a more difficult part with all the bending going on. But I already see here we have a large part of that already mapped out automatically by 3ds Max. And I'm just going to check in if I have any sort of stretching going on. So if I zoom in onto the handle, I can see the checkers are pretty okay. They are a little bit squashed, not much, and that looks already pretty fine. I just need to, I can easily correct the squash by just rescaling the mapping, but I'm first going to select everything in my 3D viewport. And if I start click and dragging, okay, that looks fine. No other parts are attached to it. And to fix up this map, I'm just clicking it to the right side. But we have some small mistakes again here. You can see that this rectangle is loose and broken. And first up, I'm going to see if I use my stitching, if it quickly fixes itself. No, it creates a nasty result. As you can see here, I'm not very happy with it. It drags up the other edge, and I can click and drag it down a bit. This. Okay. These are all very minor nuisances. So stitch, and then drag it down a bit. Stitch, drag down, stitch, this, et voila. Like I said, the checkers are a little bit off, and I think I will just need to use my scaling tool again, and I'm going to use the bottom option here, and let's see. Yep. that looks better. It hasn't changed all too much, but it just gives a better result overall. And then we have here still some little parts left, and these are actually not visible onto the model. So they are a little leftovers of my modeling process. I've been a bit sloppy in my modeling because these two faces actually could have been deleted onto the model. But I'm going to map them anyway now. It's not very important what sort of map they get because they are not visible and will never be in the game. Okay, so these are the leftover parts. They can stay over there for the moment. We have our handle here. I'm gonna scale it down to a good size. This. Okay. So now we need to fit our, we need to create a nice layout for our map, and we need to fit everything into the little checkered square here. Now the handlebar is still a large and long section, and it takes up some space, but I'm not happy with the length, and I'm going to detach one part of it. This. I'm gonna scale it down, and I'm going to try and use as much space on my little square here as possible. I'm going to fill it up like that. Oh, just need to make sure everything fits within the little square. Okay, and I'm going to select. I've been a silly boy. What I want to do first I need to make sure these two parts are overlapping. So I'm going to select vertex, this, and I'm going to switch on snap here at the right, at the bottom. And then I'm going to just drag this part over here, and I'm going to fix it up onto this model part. And like that, I can save up some space on my UV map. Again, scaling it down. It's to fit within that one. Okay, this. Like that. Okay, that's good. We now have the cross guard. Just need to, I'm going to rotate it again, because that will be better for my map. I can scale it down a little bit more. That's good. Then we have this leftover bit. This can be scaled way down. It doesn't matter much what I do with it. But just for our layout, I just position it here between these two parts. Doesn't really matter where it goes. Then we have the little knob part from the bottom of our handle. Gonna leave that to last. I first want to do my blade. Gonna position the blade over here. Like this. Move it a little bit closer. Okay, like this, and that should be fine. Okay, and now the last part of our model. Scale it down a bit. I'm going to rotate it again. Okay, So I'm going to use this part first alone. I'm going to position it around here. Okay, and then the top and bottom of the knob, I'm going to put them over here. And as like this, we have mapped our model. And now we're going to render out our UV map, because we can now use this map as a basis, a starting point for our own made skin for the model. We go to edit, no, it's in tools, and then we have a render UV template. We can pick the size, but 1000 pixels on 1000 is about a good size to create any sort of texture. We can still scale it down if we want to. I'm just going to hit the render UV. We get this very large window. Going to scale it down a little bit. Okay, so we get the full layout of our UV map. Ooh, like this. We just need to save it. So on the top left, save image. And I'm going to save it in my tutorials folder as tutorial sort UV map. Save, yes, okay. That's saved right now. We can close up the UV window. There is one more thing I like to do now, and that's the material our sword has. Right now our model looks blue, and we need to make it gray. I'm going to open up the material editor, and you can do that on this button here, or you just can hit the M key and you get the material editor window. What material do I need? We have a whole selection of materials here on my left side. I'm going to go for standard because that's the one we need in the end. That's the only material the game will use when you export our model. And at this time the material is actually a good color. It's just a neutral gray, and it will have no effect on the skin. If I left my model in this blue or made it a bright pink, then it would have a small effect on our skin in the game. It would have a strange hue tint effect in the end, so we don't want that. So a nice neutral gray is the way to go. I'm just going to switch on this button here, show material in viewport, and then with my model selected, I'm going to click on assign material. Et voila, our sword is now a nice neutral gray. There is now one more thing we need to do, and we need to slice up our model into little parts, and we need to slice it up as it was UV mapped. Else we risk the chance that the UV map gets badly treated by MDLOps and the game. And to do that, we're just going to click on Edible Mesh here. You get a warning with 3ds Max. Just hit the yes key, go to select polygon, and as you remember, we mapped this side of the blade as a separate part. So I go and select one side, and then I click on detach. You get a new window pop up here, and you have to switch on detach to element. Et voila. We now have made a first cut into our model, and we're going to select the other side here. This, detach, okay. And the back of the blade should be free now on its own. And you can check out if your model is nicely cut into smaller sections with select by element. So if I select this part of the blade, you can see I don't select any other part of my model. If I click on the crossguard here, it's still one thing, and we have this one. And you can see here on the handle, I need to actually zoom in a little bit here on the little knob. And as you remember, we mapped the knob as one bit in our UV map. So detach this, and oh, my camera is flipping a bit, so hit the Z key to properly zoom in on this part. I'm going to detach like this, and sometimes it's difficult to zoom in. Use the Z key, select one polygon and hit the Z key to properly zoom in one easy go. Detach, okay. And we need one more thing to do. We need to what is it doing? I don't need that side and I don't need that side. Okay, just selected one side of the crossguard here. Detach, okay, the front, detach. And then we need to deselect this little body here, okay. Check out, and we still have one big chunk here, and we need to detach this side as well. So I've selected this side and detach. Okay. I just need to check out my UV map. And I need to go like this. So, okay, I've just been checking because I sliced my handle in two on the UV map and made an overlapping section. So I need to do this as well on this level here. So I'm going to select this part like this. And I'm going to detach the element as well. And now our model is actually almost ready to get into the game. We're very close. And I'm just going to convert it again to editable mesh. And this will make sure our UV map is into the model. You didn't lose it, it's still in there. Okay. We can add one more modifier, and that's the Aurora Trimesh. That's not really necessary, but it leaves a few options you still can use. For instance, if you wanted your blade to be something very special or magical, you could give it a self-illumination. And if you put this to bright white, your blade will really glow. And this is what the lightsabers, for instance, use to make them very, to give them that glowy light up effect. White is super bright, gray is lighter, 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 black is off, is no sort of illumination at all. I never messed around with any sort of colors, but I'm certain they can have various effects you can actually use in the game. Something else that might be interesting is the shadow. If you switch that on, your sword will actually create a shadow on the floors or walls when you move around in any level of the Knights of the Old Republic. But you can choose what you do with that. Sometimes that's interesting. At other times, I don't think anybody really noticed if the shadows of the weapons are really there in their game. But I like to switch it on. It can be nice to have a silhouette on the ground of your epic weapon. Okay, so that's it for this part. We now have a nicely UV mapped sword model. In the next bit, I will just create I'll just create a very quickly a small texture for it, so it's not just a bland gray sword we have to put into the game. So I see you in the next part, and I hope this was a bit useful. Cheers!